their love for you will transfer back towards a love for God. That's tough. We are continually examples to what they should be. All right, so the first priority is God. Second priority that makes a difference in being godly parents is being married. And so we're going to spend time with marriage today. Hold on to your hats because we're going to move rapidly. However, that's why I have this study guide so that you can make notes, and if you want to go back through and look at it more closely, please do. If you're expecting all of the answers in an hour and 15 minutes on how to live as a great husband and wife, it ain't gonna happen. What is going to happen, though, is you're going to have a basis for doing more study and being more like Christ. And we're going to see how that's important. Okay, so having said that, I need someone to look up 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 5, and read that out to us.
One through 5.
1 through 5.
Now, concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation of sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this: I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another.
So, strange thing to be looking at. It's good for a man not to get married. Why would he say that?
So he could devote all of himself to God.
That's exactly what he says, so that he can devote himself completely and totally to God. Now, there is a reality to that. Most guys can't handle that. That is a gift from God if that gift is given. And most men don't have it. There are lots of gifts that one person has and lots don't. That's a rarity rather than a commonality. And, sorry, I'm going to pick on a denomination. I don't care. When you have a section of the church that is nothing but withdrawn from the family situation, you've got monks, you've got nuns, and they're not going to interact. Here's a surprise. Most of them do not have that gift, and therefore it has caused incredible difficulties throughout the centuries because the men couldn't stay celibate and they acted out. Mm-hmm. That's why it starts. It's because of the way things are, and God made us that way, by the way. It's better to marry. So why marriage? Because marriage, and by the way, that's number one. Marriage is how God actually created men and women to be. Okay? He made Adam, and then he took part of Adam out and created Eve from Adam. God has an order in which things are supposed to be. And the bottom line is, if we try to put those things out of order, then we're messing with God's plan. That's tough. By the way, I'm going to jump ahead, some of the dangers of divorce. Does divorce mean that you are no longer able to be used by God?
Mm-mm.
No. If you will recall correctly, Jesus met a lady at a well in Samaria and said, how did that go? Oh yeah, she had been married 5 times and was living with someone that wasn't her husband at that point in time. And how did God use her? After Jesus had the conversation with her, she went to the town and said, come and see the guy who told me everything I've ever done. And she brings the whole town over to see Jesus. Did God use her? Yeah. The whole town came. And then after they had spent time with Jesus, several days actually, they said, we believe now because we have been with him, not just because you said that. Because it wasn't about her. It was about Jesus. And if our marriages are just about each other and not about Jesus, our marriages aren't going to work. Not if we're planning on having godly children. So, divorce does not shoot you in the foot as far as your usefulness for God. Is it best? No. That doesn't mean that you're done. There is one unpardonable sin. And last time I checked, divorce wasn't it.
Mm-hmm.
It's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which means that you are calling God evil. So, what can you tell me about verses 4 and following? Actually, 3 and following. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, and also to her, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body. What is that? All that? That leads us to understanding something that our kids need to know. Not about sex, but about selfishness, and the opposite thereof, of giving. How many times have you met folks that got a divorce because of irreconcilable differences? Translated, I wasn't getting my way, and therefore I took the highway. The intimate relationship of husband and wife, not just sex, but the way that they actually interact, is how the kids view the interaction of God and us. And God intended it that way. If we speak harshly to one another, what do the kids do? Are you going to get a divorce? Second, we are harsh with one another. That goes through their mind. Sadly, if that goes through their mind, then when things get hard in their marriages, it replays. And then they're thinking, well, they fought, and it didn't work out. They just kept fighting. I might as well just give up. Now that's a sad thing, but it is a reality. So why marriage? Because God set it out in his plan. Why not just live together? Because it was God's plan. He didn't just throw them together. There was actually a marriage ceremony in the Garden of Eden, and God was officiating. Now we're going to jump into something that gets hard. need someone, actually, I need everyone to look at 1 Peter chapter 3. And we're going to do some in-depth Bible study with 1 Peter chapter 3. And then we will jump into Ephesians chapter 5 and see how all of that pulls together. 1 Peter chapter 3. Not using the normal one. And we're going to look at verses 1 through 12. But actually, we're going to look at verse 1 first. In the NIV that I have in front of me, it says, "Wives in the same way be." In the English Standard Version, it says, "Likewise." What does that mean? Whenever you see a likewise, or in the same way, or in the same manner, what does that mean you need to look at?
That's before it.
What came before? Because the likewise, this is a similitude. The actual word in the Greek means similarly. So we have to find out what he says in the previous part of the passage in order for us to understand what this is talking about. So we're going to jump back to chapter 2, and we're going to look a little bit and see what it says. So we'll go to 1 Peter chapter 2, and we're going to look at verse 13 and following. We could go back farther, but this really gives us the synopsis of what we're talking about. "Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among men, whether to the king as the supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will..." What? This is one of those rare places in the scripture where it tells you point blank, this is God's will. I'm convinced of this. If we won't do what is explicitly stated as God's will, why would he give us more of his will to bite and chew on? That make sense? Okay. God's will. "For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish men. Live as free men, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as servants of God. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers, fear God, honor the king." Oddly enough, we are supposed to be doing good. It's God's will that we do good in these kind of situations. Okay, so why is it important that we do good around our kids? We do good to one another. We do good to fellow Christians. Why?
We set an example for them.
Oh, what a novel concept. We set an example. Everything that we say and that we do sets an example to the kids that we're raising or the grandkids that we are encountering. What kind of witness are we being if we are being gossipers or detractors or harsh? What kind of example are we setting? What are we saying to the kids when we are living out rebellion against God? Because all of those things are about God and godliness. So if we're behaving badly and we're representing God, what are they going to say about God? Forget you. What are they going to say about God if you're the example? Continuing on. free men, verse 16. But do not use your freedom to cover up for evil. Did you know that your kids know it when you lie to them? Did you know that your kids know it when you have engaged in sinful activity and you haven't even told your spouse? How do they know that? God gave them 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 really bright brain to recognize what's going on. So how do we avoid giving them the notion that God is incompetent, that he can't do things right? The way that we do that is we stop being incompetent and we stop being right. Do good. It's God's will. If you are doing good, on the other hand, you are showing God to them. By the way, last time I checked, we all blow it. I want to give you a phrase that you need to put in there somewhere. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Not only is it okay to say that to folks that you have wronged, it's encouraged. It's also okay to say that to your kids. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Anyone ever punished the wrong kid? Anyone not punish the wrong kid? When you recognize that what you did was inappropriate, that you were wrong, how did you address it? Did you just go on? Or did you go to the kid and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong? That says so much more than just ignoring what was going on. That says, I'm a sinner too. I make mistakes. God has forgiven me. Will you forgive me? And let's face it, if we're not willing to forgive, we have a real problem with the model prayer. Because Jesus says if you won't forgive them, God's not going to forgive you. It matters. Okay, going on. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers. Fear God. Honor the king. Ooh. That's tough when the king's nasty. But you still have to honor the position. The person may be vile, but God put them in that position for whatever reason. By the way, we have a tendency to get the leadership that we deserve. Because whether we say it out loud or we say it in our inadvertent actions, we've asked for it. You take a look at the Old Testament in general, you'll find that there were vile kings in Israel. And why? Because they mirrored the vileness of the people.
We better be praying for mercy.
Hey, that's the point.
Yeah.
Do good to them. Pray for them. Not pray against them. Pray for them. For some odd reason, Tale of Two Cities just came into my brain. Yeah, praying against me. Slaves, verse 16. Verse 18. I can't see. Slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but to those who are harsh. What's the equivalent to that in our world? Last time I checked, I didn't have any slave markings on me. Well, there are harsh people, but this specifically is about one thing. How do you behave in the workplace? What did the slaves do? They worked for the masters. Do you know folks who claim to be Christians who in the workplace cheat? They cheat time. They'll stay a little bit late for lunch and, yeah, well, I'll make it up, and it never makes up. Or they clock in and then they go do something else and then they start again, but they've already clocked in, and whatever they did on the other side, they're getting paid for by the company. There are problems. Do you think your kids know that when you do it? I thought you were going to work. Well, I am, sort of. I'll be there. They know it. For it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because he is conscious of God. It's better to endure the suffering and be godly, because that shows God to your boss. That shows God to his secretary or your co-workers. We are supposed to be working as unto the Lord in every aspect of our lives, including at work. Wait a minute. What does this have to do with godly parenting? Remember the likewise? Like you were supposed to be doing this at home or at work? You're supposed to be doing what's right at work? Does it apply at home? Nope. How is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. Quoting from where? Isaiah. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls.
1 Peter chapter 2.
Very good. And we're done. The reality is, we are supposed to be behaving like Christ. That's what Christian actually means, little Christ. And so if we are dealing with being harshly treated at work, and occasionally harshly treated at home, or the neighbor next door treats you harshly, whatever, we respond in the same fashion that Jesus did. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You remember that phrase? What were they doing? Crucifying him. They were making him endure the harshest form of death that the Romans could figure out. And they were really good at figuring out harsh pain. They were experts. By the way, just to let you know, they were also experts in dead. And when they called Jesus dead, he was dead. The end. Mm-hmm. You know how when in the shows that they will put a mirror up underneath someone's nose to make sure that they were actually dead? Where do you think they got that? The Romans knew that. They could do that, and they would, just to make sure you weren't faking. They knew dead. he was dead. And even in death, he's forgiving them. Regardless of how harshly you are treated, you still respond like Christ. That's that. This is God's will for you. Do good. Anyone ever been harshly treated in a church? Do good. Jesus put it this way. Do good to them that despitefully use you. It's like heaping coals of fire on their head. It causes them to feel their own sin. Then what's the result? What happened when Paul behaved in the kind of manner that he's talking about here when he was in prison? Prison guards got saved, right and left. This morning Sunday school lesson, Onesimus, what happened to him? He was serving Paul in prison. He got saved. Amen. Harsh treatment, big deal. Be godly. All of that was the likewise. Now we get to the part where folks get mad when you read it. Wives, in the same way, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. Why is it important for there to be submission in that phrase? Who is the example? That's what we just read. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow his steps. Okay, that's what it says, right? So, submission. Oh, by the way, is that a two-way street? Oddly enough, there are some things that your spouse may do that they're way better at than you. The idea of submission, the Greek word is hypotasso, to voluntarily place yourself under the responsibility of someone else. Okay? Let me give you an example. Y'all aren't listening fast enough.
Are you
Yeah.
going to Galatians?
I am not you.
Galatians?
The other end of the hall.
Oh, they
Yes.
changed it?
No, that's where we were last time. Anyway,
Stay here if you want.
in the Joint Chiefs of Staff in our military, if we are having a naval exercise, who's in charge of the exercise?
An admiral, hopefully.
The admiral of the top admiral of the Navy, yeah. Well, yeah, you're right, hopefully, because if the Army general that's there tries to be in charge of the Navy, he doesn't know what he's doing, and therefore he's going to do something stupid. Trying to get the Seabees to go out and take Iwo Jima would not have worked real well. Because the Seabees, they were construction workers. They had guns for protection, but they were construction workers. Still are. The word hypotasso actually means to place yourself under the responsibility of someone else. And there are times when the spouse it makes a whole lot more sense to let them in some place lead. If they're better than you are at something. Sometimes the women are better at finances. I've known some guys, they couldn't keep a checkbook if it was in their pocket. whatever the strengths are, that's where you deal with it. But in the marriage, in the same way, be submissive to your husbands, in the same way as wife. In the same way that Jesus was submissive to the Father and went to the cross. Was it for his benefit that he did that? It was for the benefit of those who needed saving. Okay, going on. When they see the purity, I love that verse too. We actually have an example of that in our church, where a saved woman was married to a lost man, and because of her godly behavior, it reached the lost husband for Christ. Oddly enough, a woman's behavior is going to affect how the husband performs. The negative side of that is with Adam and Eve, the woman's behavior negatively affected and everyone afterwards. In a family, the woman's behavior can positively affect the way that the husband turns out. Guess what happens when that happens with the kids? By the way, we're at the point of how do parents' attitudes affect the behavior of the children. When they see your purity and reverence of your lives, your beauty should not come from outward adornment such as braided hair and the wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. So, where are we with that? Does that mean that you should never put on makeup and do your hair? Guys, I wouldn't if I were you. These days, that would not work out real well.
These days, that would work out fine.
Not for the marriage, it wouldn't.
Just saying.
There's a reality here. We spend in our culture so much time trying to look pretty and handsome and all that we have forgotten that which is on the outside is fluff.
Mm-hmm.
It is that which is on the inside that makes you who you are. And even more than that, it is who is on the inside that makes you who you are really supposed to be. So, if our insides are empty and we put all sorts of makeup on it, you know what we are? Jesus said something about that. Empty sepulchres. You know what a sepulcher is, right? That's where you put dead people. Yeah, it's a grave. Without Christ in there, all you are is pretty on the outside and nothing on the inside. And if you have Christ in your heart and he is ruling, you're beautiful from the inside out. Husband's going to notice that. A wife's going to notice that. How you behave on the inside and let it flow through is how they're going to perceive you. By the way, just to remind you, we are not perfect. And remember that phrase that I gave you? I'm sorry. I am wrong. It's a good one to put into practice between the husband and the wife. And you know what happens when the kids see that happening? They're going to say, oh, it's okay for me to make a mistake, but it's better for me to make it right. We're going to make mistakes. we're going to sin. And we need forgiveness. We need to ask for forgiveness from the other person. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to be asking forgiveness from God for those sins in front of our kids. God, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I should have withheld my tongue. I should have treated it differently. I'm sorry. Make it right with me and you, and make it right with me and them. Continuing on. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to make themselves beautiful. What makes you beautiful is your hope in God. If it's our hair, guys, some of us have a real problem. But it's not about the hair. And if you look in the mirror and you think, wow, that could be better, look in the heart and see if that could be better. Because that's what really matters to the wife. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her master. By the way, did he ask her to do some really stupid things?
Yeah.
Did she do them? Okay, was it stupid?
Yeah.
Yes. Did God fix it? Yes. In fact, God saved the ones that he was being stupid about from doing something really bad. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Okay, so pick on the ladies now. Guys, here we go. Husbands, in the same way, wait. That's likewise, isn't it, in the ESV? Likewise, in the same way. Similarly, in the translation of direct translation of the Greek. Similarly, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner, and as heir with you in the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Ooh, this is big stuff right here, guys. Ladies, if you try to lord this over on the guy, that's not being submissive. Just saying. But guys, what do you have to be? Considerate. You actually have to think about them before you. What's in their best interest? What does God want in their life that you can help them find? And if you are behaving in that considerate fashion, what are the kids going to be seeing? Treat them as respect as the weaker partner. There's another passage that says weaker vessel. Do you know what that actually is talking about? Does it mean that you are weak and pitiful and worthless? Let me give you an example. I can have a clay pot, and I can have a Ming vase. Which one is weaker? It's going to break far easier than the clay pot. Which is more precious? The Ming vase. Why? Because it was crafted to be beautiful. Instead of being utile, being used and usable, it was crafted to be beautiful from the inside out. So was woman initially. He was made from man. She was perfect. It is good for man. Remember, we looked at that that last time. The first time that God ever said it was not good was when it was Adam by himself. And after he makes Eve, what does he say? It's good. Weaker vessel, more precious vessel. Easier to break. Think about that one, guys, when you're dealing with your wife. Easier to break. Respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Ever been in the place, guys, where your prayers, you were certain they never went past the ceiling? This says that how you treat your wife is a direct correlation with your responsibility and your relationship with God. Your prayers are hindered if you're not treating your wife as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. And that's tough. What's your relationship like with your wife? Do the kids see that? You better believe they do. We're going to jump over to. Do I want to go? Yeah. We need to go ahead and go through verse 12. Finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. Whenever the things in your life are going bad, don't turn against each other, because that damages each of you and it damages your kids. Don't repay evil for evil or insult with insult. Instead, but with blessing. You get mad, you unload, you know what you don't want to hear? God loves you. And I love you too. That will shut down an argument like nobody's business. Why? Because it brings it away from the two of you and brings the third chord, as is written in Psalms. The third chord, which binds you together. And those harsh things start to be softened by the love of God flowing through you. Do the kids see that? Oh, yeah. Because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and then pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Did you hear that last part? If what we are doing against each other is that bad, it is evil. And the Lord is against that. What does he want to give instead? He wants blessing. He wants that to change from the harshness into the love that he bestowed on each of us on the cross and sealed with the resurrection. That's those are big things. Okay, Ephesians chapter 5. For those of you who can't find it, go eat popcorn. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Okay, starting with verse 15. Yeah, most folks would start at verse 22, where it says, "Wives, submit yourselves to husbands." But just like in the passage from Peter, it starts earlier. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Wait. Didn't we just talk about God's will? Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. Speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. So, this is, what God's will is. It says it once again. Our focus needs to be on Him, not me. He has shown you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God. One of those other places where it says specifically what God's will is for you. Micah 6:8. If we're going to be godly parents, then we have to be godly. It's that simple. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Verse 21. Now we get to the wives and the husbands thing. But there's something even more important than the wives and husbands things, and we'll get to that to the end of this passage. Wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. Wait. He just brought in a different aspect, didn't he? This is different than what we saw in 1 Peter, because now he is starting to make the equation between our relationship and Christ's relationship with the church. Now, what does that mean? As we flesh this out, it means that God is communicating to us and to our children through this picture. Husbands, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Oh, by the way, here's the deal. How does the church submit to Christ? We receive the blessing of salvation. We receive a calling to be godly. And we receive the Holy Spirit to empower us to actually live that out. Big deals. As the church submits to Christ, has the church ever told Christ to take a hike? Yes. And what's the result? Has it made the church stronger? What it's done is caused the division. By the way, folks, that's why we have denominations. It's not because we love each other. It's because we were divided. We stopped focusing on God and started focusing on, is it okay for me to get away with? How do you think the Catholic Church got started in its current form? Constantine sent folks out to see what other people were believing when he came to acknowledge Christ in whatever way that he did. And said, okay, so they believe this. Can we fit this into the story? How can this story be fit into theirs? And it continually was diluted by other religions instead of allowing God to be the one who decided what's right and what's wrong. what fits and what does not. Where did the veneration of Mary come from? Egypt. Isis. Literally. Well, that sounds kind of like what happened with Mary, so it's okay, but we'll let it come in. That's how it happened. Is that the way it's supposed to be? Nope. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. He is the priority. Now, the church, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present herself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Wait. Did you notice that their part was a whole lot longer than the ladies' part? Go back to the first verse there. Our job is to make the ladies look great on the inside. We build them up. If we're not building them up, there is no static. Static is nothing but interference. We're either building them up or we are tearing them down. Ladies, does the same thing with you and your husband. You're either building them up or you're tearing them down. Silence is not golden in a marriage. Silence is static. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one has ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it just as Christ does the church. Once again, that equation, Christ and the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Wait. Isn't that the pronouncement of the marriage ceremony in Genesis chapter 2? This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Those things are tough. No one said being married was easy. No one said that being a godly man or a godly woman was easy. And no one said we're going to be perfect at it. But we have that nice little phrase, I'm sorry, I was wrong. The same phrase that we have to continually go back to God and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Let's take a look at this. We've actually done the Matthew 19 part, because that is, I think, no. Go to Matthew chapter 19. Divorce. Some Pharisees came to him to test him. Test him. What? Testing God? That comes under the heading of stupid, by the way, just to let you know. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Wait. They didn't just ask about if it was okay to divorce the wife, they went that little bit further for each and every reason. Isn't that what our culture keeps asking? What's the reason for the divorce? Irreconcilable differences. I'm not getting my way. Each and every reason. She didn't fix eggs and bacon every day like I like. I can live without eggs and bacon. But he didn't bring home enough money. He was lazy. He might have been, by the way, just saying. She's lazy. She might have been. But that's not how we're supposed to approach marriage, is it? I'm about you. That's marriage. She's about me. That's marriage. Haven't you read, he replied, that in the beginning the Creator made them male and female? What? Is that why we started in Genesis? And said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh, so they are no longer two but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, this is important. Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. Wait. Isn't that an indicator that they were sinful? I'm pretty sure that Isaiah talked about what God was going to do when the Messiah came. He was going to take men's hearts and change them from stone to flesh. Hard-hearted meant lost. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness and marries another woman commits adultery. Ooh, that's tough. Does that mean that your value to God is gone if it happens? Remember the woman at the well. John chapter 4, verses 3 through 42. Remember the woman at the well. Does that mean that you have no place in the kingdom? No. Does it limit some of the things that you can do? Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you're not loved by God. These days we have a really tough time in religious circles, if you will, because they don't like these passages. These passages don't go away because you don't like them. And if you're going to argue with them, who are you arguing against? This is Jesus talking. The disciples said to him, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, is it better not to marry? I think we've read this part too. Jesus said, not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it was given. For some are eunuchs because they were born that way, others were made that way by men, and others have renounced marriage because of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it. However, what does it say? You are what God calls you to be. If you are in a marriage, he has called you to be married, and the husband and the wife working together. If that has been torn apart, he has called you to be faithful to him. That's the beginning, the middle, and the end. Wherever you are, be faithful to him. It's God's will that you do good. Or as Paul put it, in whatever situation you find yourself, be satisfied in that. Don't be looking for something different. God can bring something different to you. But you fulfill your calling wherever you are. Divorce is not the unpardonable sin. Jesus didn't strike the woman dead at the well. Just remember that part. He used her in a saving of herself and her whole village. She was not useless in God's kingdom because of her past sin, but was redeemed by her new faith in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The marriage thing, it is a representation of Christ and the church. And when Christ and the church are working together, then communities are brought to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. We reach out to the community because Christ has called us to live that way. And if we're not reaching out to Valley Center, then we are being rebellious. And it needs to stop. And once again, we have that phrase, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Let me serve you the way you want to be served. Try that in your marriage. Let me serve you the way you want to be served. And we're done 5 minutes early. Next time that we meet, we will be talking about the kids and our interactions. But trust me, you're wasting your time talking to the kids if you're not right together. Because they can see through a fraud quicker than you can see through glass. Jared, would you lead us pray?